Okay. All right, here we are. Our small but mighty crew. But we know this, as I was just saying a second ago, we know that this is an important topic. And so because there are so many things going on in the district right now, people may have their attention on other things tonight, but they'll want to watch this later because it's election season. And also everybody's always wanting to figure out how they might advocate in their PTAs. So my name is Michelle Parker, and I am on the Second District Board as an advisor this year. I've served in a lot of different roles in the past, but this year I'm an advisor. And we build this meeting tonight as about PTA and the elections, which it absolutely includes. But I also wanted to just zoom back a little bit and address elections within the broader context of advocacy. And so as you have questions, please just list them in the chat and I'll catch them along the way, unless it starts putting us up against the clock, and then we'll just leave them to the end and try to find other ways to answer them if we run out of time. There is a lot of information to cover in this, but there's probably time for questions here and there. So there is a lot happening, as I mentioned, in our district right now, some really, really hard things for a lot of our different school communities. And so hopefully the session will help with a lot of that, helping to navigate through advocacy efforts at your own school. But I wanted to maybe just take a minute and disrupt some of the stuff that might be bogging us all down. There's, hard, negative stuff perhaps. And so maybe if you can just take a minute and post in the chat, what is something beautiful that you've seen recently? We'll just take a minute to do that. Give you a second to think about it. Views of San Francisco. Absolutely, we are in a beautiful place. The sunset, babies. I was just visiting my son this weekend, and I was hiking in the mountains. And it was really, really beautiful. There were some spectacular fall colors that we don't really have in San Francisco. And I love fall. It's my favorite season. So it was really fun to see aspens and cottonwoods and all their like yellows and oranges. Oh, morning light in your neighborhood. Morning light is beautiful. I do not like that it's getting lighter much later. It's kind of throwing my wake up time off a little bit, but and morning light is a nice thing. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, shoot, I just spilled some water. All right. All right, so tonight, here's what we're going to focus on. Here's our agenda. We are going to talk about what advocacy is and how it fits within our PTA purposes. We can talk about what issues your PTA can advocate on and how we do that, and also how to organize and actually do the advocating. And then, of course, take some questions and answer them as best that I can. So let's start first with what is advocacy? Okay, so let's do this. If you can use the reaction buttons in Zoom, so you can raise your hand, not the permanent raise your hand, but just like the quick raise your hand to answer these questions and indicate whether you've ever done any of these things, okay? So the first question, raise your hand if you've done this. Have you ever talked with your child's teacher and asked a question about how you can help your child or asked for help with your child? Okay. Have you ever spoken with a doctor about something your child needed? Maybe they were sick or you needed advice on supporting them with something when you maybe were a brand new parent? Raise your hand if you've ever done that. Okay. Have you ever attended a PTA or school site council meeting and asked a question about the data that was shared or voted on a plan to support students? Okay. Have you ever contacted an elected official? That might be a school board member, a board of supervisors, a mayor, anybody, an elected official. All right, several of you. Have you ever called a company to ask for a refund or to fix a problem? Okay. Have you helped a neighbor or a grandparent figure out a bus schedule? Have you ever volunteered for a campaign? That could be for a candidate or for a ballot measure. Or have you suggested somebody should vote a certain way based on what values that vote would support? Okay, so I have news for you. You are an advocate if you said yes to any of those things. No worries. It's okay if you can figure out how to raise your hand. These are, good to ask and see that all of us have done some of these kinds of things. But these are things that advocates do. So wanted to establish that first. So advocacy is any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. As if you're a parent, we often are pleading on behalf of our children, or doing something we can do to support them, but there are a lot of other ways we advocate in our communities and on a daily basis or throughout different parts of our lives. Okay, so the next question is, how does advocacy fit in with PTA purposes? So when I first got involved with the district PTA as legislation chair, I won't tell you what year, but you might be able to guess. It's a long time ago. A number of parents from across the district got together and we set up some meetings with our local representatives to the state legislature. And I won't ever forget, one day we were sitting in Assembly Member Tom Amiano's office. So it's been a while since he was in that office, but we sat in his office when he told us that it was our job as his constituents to tell him what he needs to know as he makes decisions and takes votes in the state legislature. We know you don't usually get what you don't ask for. And so that really stuck with me, is that like this was a person who helped put our public education enrichment fund on the ballot. He made sure that school funding was watched out for with the establishment of the rainy day fund in San Francisco, which has now kind of morphed into, it looks a little bit different than when he first set it up. And he, doing all of that, still needed us as parents to advocate and advise him on education issues at the state level. It was our job as constituents to tell him that. So you see here, the third purpose of the PTA is to secure adequate laws for the care and protection of children and youth. One of our core values at the state level of the PTA is that we believe our responsibility includes advocating for the safety and welfare of all children and the opportunity for a quality education for each child. So it's our job as advocates in the PTA to educate decision makers at our local level, so here in San Francisco, or even in your own neighborhood with your supervisor, at the state level and or at federal levels, at the entire country level. So people who are our US Congress people or senators or other decision makers, not just elected officials, but people who make decisions in other levels of government. It's also our job to educate the public on issues that matter to us and serve children. It's our job to influence laws, policies, and programs. And there's this great saying that I learned many, many years ago from a mentor of mine, that no amount of fundraising equals the impact of a single piece of good legislation. Many of us here in California are always advocating for more funding for our schools. And if we, people sometimes associate the PTA with fundraising, but if we can actually organize ourselves and advocate and get some good laws passed or ballot measures passed that impact, that will have way more effect than doing a fundraiser at our school would, right? So advocacy can be a really powerful, powerful thing that we can do. And one of our main purposes as a PTA. So advocacy is the heart of what PTA does and why it's here. So the National PTA is the oldest and largest volunteer association working exclusively on behalf of all children and youth. And for more than 100 years, the National PTA has promoted the education, health, and safety of children, youth, and families. Our founders were Phoebe Apperson-Hurst and Allison McClellan-Birney, who are greatly concerned about the nation's children. You can read a lot about the history of these women and others who joined them to start the PTA. We talk about it a lot during Founders Day in February every year, and there's a lot of information on the California PTA and the National PTA website. But they were looking for ways to support the nation's children. There were all these effects of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of immigration, children working in factories, and so they wanted to support these children. And so they started their efforts in 1897. So the mission of the California State PTA, which we are part of as the Second District, is to positively impact the lives of all children and families by representing our nearly 1 million members and empowering them and supporting them with skills in advocacy, leadership, and communications. The PTA is the nation's oldest and largest advocacy organization working on behalf of children. There are certainly other education organizations, but for the organizations working on behalf of children, we are the largest and oldest. So because of the PTA, I'm going to just move this so everybody can see. Because of our PTA, the nation has lots of different things here, right? So kindergarten, if you didn't know, is part of our public education system because of PTA advocacy. They also early on advocated for child labor laws to protect children against unsafe working conditions and practices. The hot lunch program that now is in all of our schools that feeds millions of children is a result of the PTA. We have a separate juvenile justice system so that children won't be tried and incarcerated as adults. We have music labels to help parents know which lyrics are explicit. And we also have TV ratings. So this is a short list of all that the PTA has done at a national level. And then the question, of course, always is like, what can we do next as a group if we organize ourselves in an advocacy effort? So what issues can your PTA advocate on? So before I get into answering that, I want you to understand what the PTA structure is. So this is like a quick diagram. So we have the national PTA, right? So we're all connected. It's not just at your own school site. At the national level, we have the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association nationwide. Funneling up to the nationwide PTA or the state PTA. So all of our states have a PTA. So that's the next level down. And the next level below that is a district PTA like us. We're here in the second district of the California State PTA. So we are a district PTA. Underneath a district is a council PTA. And then underneath a council is a unit PTA. Now, here in San Francisco, we do not have councils. We're sort of unique in so many ways. We think we're so unique in San Francisco, but we are a district PTA that lives inside of a school district, that lives inside of a city, that it lives inside of a county. It's all the same thing, like just completely over, just the same geographic area. So we are the district, and then we have all of these units, and it varies a little bit, the number that we have every year. It always hovers somewhere around 62, 63, but between 60 and 65 is always about where we are with the number of units, which is what we call a school site PTA. Okay, so now that you know that, let's see, I want to try to move this thing out of the way so that you all can everybody can see the top of these slides. Okay, so when you wonder which PTA takes a position on an issue, here's a little bit of a tip. So the national PTA will take positions on federal issues. So for instance, if we're looking at but back when No Child Left Behind was formed, right? So like that's changed now. That's not what it's called anymore. But back then, that was a federal law. And so that was something that the national PTA would take on and research and take a position on. And then every other PTA underneath it could take that same position without having to do a specific vote or action because it was at a national level. At the state level, that the state's responsibility is to take issues on statewide issues. So if we have statewide ballot measures, the second district PTA doesn't vote on those measures. The state PTA votes to endorse those measures or not. Or if there is state legislation in Sacramento that's being considered, the state PTA is who takes positions on that because it's a statewide issue. We can still act on behalf of whatever that position is. If they have endorsed a certain bill or endorsed a certain measure, we are allowed to, we just kind of are grandfathered in to that action. And I'll explain a little bit more like, well, what if you're not a huge fan of the action that was taken? I'll explain how you manage that. But that's the level at which that takes place. The district PTA takes positions on citywide issues. So if we have a San Francisco ballot measure, the district PTA is who takes that position on like support or not support or could be neutral. Or if there was a different issue that was happening in a citywide level, the district PTA does that. A unit PTA can also take its own positions on issues that are very local to it, something happening within your own school, something happening within your neighborhood. That directly affects you. For instance, I know schools who have had, there was a cell tower being built really close to the school, and so they got involved with something like that. So that's who takes the position on different types of issues. Now, how we take a position is we have to have authorities. So this is a list of what PTA authorities are. And an authority is really just a justification for our position. So we can't just say, well, I like that thing, so I want to say we should support it. There has been a lot of work over time, a lot of research on data, evidence that shows what really is best for students. And these kinds of policies, procedures, resolutions all reflect that research that has been done to know what is an evidence-based approach to supporting young people and their families. So you would look for the California PTA legislation, policies, and procedures. There's also a platform that's taken every term that shows what the priorities for the PTA are in terms of advocacy. There are also California State PTA resolutions. That is the highest authority that we can have, and here's why. So this is a topic that maybe your school would decide really matters to you, and so you would start to do research on that. You would pull together, there's a whole bunch of citations you have to have to be able to present it to the California PTA. There's a ton of research and a certain number of pieces of evidence that have to back it up, and then that resolution gets written and then brought to the entire state PTA at a convention, and then it's debated on a convention floor, and then it is voted on by all of the members who are there, and then whatever the position is what then empowers the state PTA and any other PTA to advocate on behalf of whatever that resolution is. We have authored resolutions in the Second District PTA. We did one on the achievement gap many years ago. We've done some on school health or student health and wellness. So this is something that any PTA can start to work on, and it does take a lot of work. And because of that, and because it was voted on by members at a membership convention, that is why it is our highest authority. So there are also position statements that are adopted by the California PTA Board of Managers, and that's a group of all of the district PTA presidents across the state, as well as other members who serve on different commissions and committees for the state PTA to do the work. They're all volunteers, but they will work on these things. There's also national PTA resolutions and positions. There might be previous action the PTA has taken. You look at the purposes of PTA, all of that. It helps to determine what the authorities are that a PTA uses to determine whether they can take action or a position on a certain issue. I'm going to ask Melissa or Liz, if you haven't already, oh, there you go, to post a link so you can see where those can be found. And there also, that link will be in the notes for this slide deck, which we'll share at the end of this presentation tonight, so you can find them yourself as well and take a look. Thank you for that. Okay, so here's what I was trying to get at a minute ago. So what if you want to take a position on a state or a city issue at your school? So if the Second District or the California PTA takes no position on that that particular issue, which has happened, you know, that maybe there's a bill that you're particularly interested in that's up for consideration in Sacramento, but the state PTA hasn't taken a position on it, there is a possibility that you can take action on it. So the way that you would do that is that you would research both sides as a PTA. You would look to see if you would do a study committee. I'll explain a little bit more about that soon, but you would research both sides of the issue, make sure you fully understand it. You would look for relevant PTA authorities, that list of things I just went through, to see if they would support that. And you would also have a general membership vote and record that in your minutes so that it's very clear that there was a clear and thoughtful process to make sure that it actually wasn't just one person's opinion, but it was actually backed up by all of the research and work that the PTA has done and stands for. And then you would take that. But even before that, you would actually just want to check in. So if it was a citywide issue, you can say, hey, Second District PTA, have you all considered this issue? And if we said, we have, but we're not going to take a position on this for, for whatever reason, then you could go do your research. Or we might say, hey, state PTA, we are really interested in this thing. Are you going to take a position? And if they might say, we actually thought about it, but there weren't enough authorities, and that's why we're not. Or they might say, we're just not going to consider it, but you're welcome to consider it if you'd like to. Sometimes that happens on state level issues that are actually relevant to just a particular area of the state. Sometimes they won't take a position. So those are the kind of instances where you might be able to take a position as a school site unit PTA on a state or a citywide issue. Are there any questions about that in particular? Because I know that can be a little bit confusing before I move on. Okay, cool. All right, so this is really important in the PTA. We need to focus only on issues in the PTA, not on candidates. Our nonprofit, so participation or intervention in a political campaign, like candidate political campaign, will endanger our organization's nonprofit status with the IRS. We are not allowed to do it because we are a nonprofit organization. Now, I just want to note that some people say PTAs can't be political. The reality is lots of things are political, even if you don't want them to be, because even issues can be political. So I'm not sure that that would be the right characterization of whether a PTA should or shouldn't get involved in it, because people can really debate and feel strongly about either side of an issue. But if it's an issue that that is important for the welfare of children and students and families, then we can absolutely take a position on it, even if it feels political. But the real important distinction is issues, not candidates. So we as a PTA are nonpartisan. That means we don't side with a particular political party. So we are not a Democratic supporting organization or Republican or independent or green or whatever. We are non-commercial. That means we don't support particular businesses. We don't promote businesses, specific businesses. We are also non-sectarian. So we're not preferential to particular religions. So we try to stay out of all of that and really keep our focus on what's best for kids. Our elections, some elections are not partisan. So like the school board is not, this Democrat is running for this position and this Republican is running for this position on the school board. That's not what they are, right? They're nonpartisan offices, but because it's a candidate, you still cannot take a position on a school board candidacy because it's a candidate. So you can only take a position on issues. Hopefully that's really clear, and I've said it enough times that that is clear. There's a couple of other pieces of guidance I want to share, and that is that a current or former PTA board member must not use their PTA title or the name of the PTA if they endorse a candidate, even if it's just for purposes of identification, like in a campaign brochure or on a website or whatever it is. Or in like maybe you're writing a letter to a newspaper, whatever it is, you cannot use your PTA title because there is a risk of people assuming that that means that the PTA endorses that candidate or doesn't support that candidate. And so we have to be really careful and responsible about the way we use our PTA titles in association with our name when we're talking about candidates and issues, frankly. Because if the PTA hasn't taken a position on that, then we need to also refrain from using the PTA title. If it is a position, for instance, the Second District PTA has endorsed a few ballot measures this year. So if a PTA member was asked to write some kind of a support there, they could use their PTA title for an issue because the PTA has endorsed it, but never, never, never with candidate endorsements. And I would also recommend that you should use your judgment when, if you are a PTA leader, in privately endorsing a candidate, because it could negatively affect a future relationship with an elected officials. Like maybe a different one wins, and so maybe the one who won that you didn't support might not want to work with your PTA and you if you actively endorse them. So you just want to be really careful if you are in a very visible role in your community as a PTA leader in how you privately endorse, even if it's not with your PTA title, people may know you that way. So just be cautious and be thoughtful in how you do that. PTA members, however, may run for office and they may list their PTA involvement in their biographical information. So if one of you wanted to run for supervisor or any kind of position later in the future, you can say that you were involved with your PTA for 7 years in your bio. That's totally fine. Or served as president of this PTA or whatever. You're allowed to do that. It's different than you using your PTA title as an endorsement mechanism. Okay. So what can you do? Because that might feel like a lot of what you cannot do. So you can promote and organize voter registration. There are still lots of people who are not registered. We have about 500,000 registered voters in San Francisco, but there are many more people than that who live here, who are eligible to register to vote. So you can do voter registration activities. You can definitely organize GOTV, which means get out the vote. So encouraging people to vote. Don't tell them necessarily how to vote on all the issues unless it's a PTA endorsed one. Don't tell them how to vote. Just say, exercise your right to vote, study the issues, see what really matters to you, and make sure you vote, because it's really important for us to be civically engaged and to know what kind of decisions are being made that affect us and our families and our schools. You may also organize or participate in candidate forums. So we have hosted many of these in the past as a Second District PTA. And when we do this, we make sure that every candidate is invited. You can't have a threshold for some kind of thing where you only invite some and not others. All candidates have to be invited. And you have to disseminate factual, objective information about the candidate. So it's not preferencing one or the other. One of the other rules with this is that if you have a forum, say in a school auditorium, you can't have to invite the candidates to bring any of their campaign literature into the forum room. They can all have it outside outside on the public sidewalk, that's fine. But inside where the forum actually happens, you cannot have campaign literature, or people can't wear like buttons that say which candidate they support inside the event, because we want it to be an informational experience, not a promotional experience, if that makes sense. So all of this, we just really want people, our members in the PTA, to be really civically involved. And this is really helpful, especially in down ballot races. And what I mean by a down ballot race is that at the top of your ticket tends to be, right, like president is the very top of our ticket this November. And we might look at the governor, that's also very high on your ballot. Mayor is very high on the ballot. But when you get further and further down, you're seeing things like school board, city college board, judges, things like that. Although, like that could be something that matters in a certain community that they where they really want to spend some attention on judge races, for instance. So especially in those down ballot races, it's really helpful to help members learn about what the issues are that they should consider and learn about when they're making their decisions about who they want to support. Okay, so again, issues, not candidates. All right, so how can we advocate? So I mentioned a little earlier that we can have a study committee to research an issue and decide whether or not your PTA can take a position. So you'll research the issue. Melissa pasted, I think it was Melissa, one of them posted a link earlier in the chat that had information about forming a study committee. And here you would research the issue. You would identify that the PTA authorities that relate to that issue and see, is there enough authority here to actually take a position, or am I really trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? So you need to take some thought and care, and then you make a recommendation. This happens by putting together a report. We have some examples. I have some links in the notes. You can see past study committee reports, and you will also see links to the most recent study committee reports that happened for the November 2024 election for the measures that the PTA has taken endorsement positions on. So you can see what those reports are, and they will give you background. What is this measure? What is the issue? What would it do if there's a yes vote on it? What's the background? Why is it even coming to the voters? And then it starts to go into the details of what will happen if this passes. And then you look into what are all of those authorities that a PTA had, that our PTAs have in order to support or oppose the issue, because sometimes it's an opposed position, it's not a support. This year, the ones that we'll share with you are all support, but sometimes it might be opposed. And then the reports end with a recommendation. And then that recommendation is brought to the entire membership. So we'll bring that, for instance, at the district level, we'll bring that recommendation. The study committee will present the report, say, here's a summary of what we did. You can all read everything we did. Here's our recommendation. We would now like to bring this all to a vote. And then everybody who is in attendance votes. It's just like any other vote where you have to have a quorum. You have to have a majority who support it in order for the PTA to endorse or oppose a particular measure. So that's how the study committee works. And it would work the same way even if it wasn't a ballot measure. If it was just an issue that's coming up in your own community or an issue that was coming up at the city level, we would do the same thing. Okay? And there are, and like I said, there's the link if you want to read more about how that works, but feel free to ask me. There are a few others in the district PTA who have been part of study committees and how this would work. This is a screenshot of a study committee report we did a few years ago that I did with a few other people. We were studying an affordable housing bond that was on 5 years ago on the ballot. And you can see just a little bit of what the format is like. It says who is very, very transparent. Who was a part of that committee? What are we recommending? Here is a description of what the measure does, and then on, as I just described a minute ago. And you'll see a link to this one as an example in the notes for the slide. And then so we ended up endorsing that particular measure. And so once we did that, we started advocating. And so we had some images that we posted on social media to encourage people to support the measures. So you can see in that year we had voted yes on E, yes on A, and then also we had voted no on Prop C, which was it was a tobacco tax. Or I'm sorry, it was oh my gosh, now I'm forgetting exactly what the measure was, but we had big tobacco coming in wanting to have flavored tobacco, and we didn't want that. We didn't want to have influence over our children because of the tactics they were using. So we voted no on Prop C that year. The other thing that you can do, if it's a citywide issue and it's something that we're trying to get a lot of the word out, then the Second District PTA will often produce what is called a scrubbed version of a informational sheet. That means it's just informational. There's no persuasive language on it. And that kind of a sheet can be shared electronically or with a hard copy with anybody on your school site, because it's not a persuasive piece of literature. Sometimes when the school district is involved in a school district related measure, they will produce a scrubbed sheet and then distribute it through their communication channels so that anybody's allowed to see it. It just can't say vote yes on whatever. It just say, here's this measure and here's what it would do, period. And it's just informational. We also will produce persuasive pieces that can be shared not using district resources. So what I mean by a district resource is if you wanted to share hard copies, you would not be allowed to copy them on a school photocopier. You would not be allowed to pass them out on a school site, like at a PTA meeting. You couldn't use any of the school's resources to do that. What you could do is share those persuasive things. Like, for instance, if your PTA has its own website that the PTA pays for and runs, it's not associated with SFUSD. If you wanted to pass out literature on the public sidewalk, you would be allowed to do that. If you wanted to have a persuasive, like, come and vote and learn about this thing, we really support it and here's why, you could do it offsite, like at a park or somewhere else that's not the school site, where the district is using public resources to pay for that. They're not allowed to do that. They can get in a lot of trouble for doing that. So we have to be really careful about those kinds of rules. If you are curious at all about more of that, just ask me. I've had to dig into it many, many times over the years. So let's see, the question from Kristen is, so we can proactively advocate and also endorse, and these are separate and different. They're kind of the same. So you can advocate for a measure if it has been endorsed. So if the PTA endorses a ballot measure, you are allowed to then advocate to support that ballot measure. You would not be able to just advocate because you felt like it. You could only advocate for a particular issue as a PTA if it is like a measure that's been endorsed. The slight difference in that is that if you have, for instance, if we passed a resolution at convention this year around, like we passed some recent ones around climate change, you would be totally allowed to advocate for that as your PTA without having some kind of a formal endorsement meeting, because there's already a very established position about how we think about that, or access to drinking water. There are several that are interesting, like having lead in your water. You can find position statements that make it very clear. There's no many sources that you need to have, that make that clear. Taking an official endorsement position on a measure, you absolutely need a study committee, but there are a few things that are very cut and dry, like advocating for school funding, things like that, but there's just no question you don't need to do a full study committee because it's a very, very clear PTA position. I know that might sound a little bit fuzzy. So if you have questions about that, just reach out to us and we can help you understand the difference. And it might help you just to kind of read through what the general positions of the PTA are, and you can feel pretty confident. If those are not debatable, if they're pretty straightforward, you can feel confident just advocating in that way. But if it's on a bill, if it is on a measure, if it's on something that might be controversial and people can see it a lot of different ways, then a study committee is the way to go to take an official endorsement or oppose, and then you can do advocacy on behalf of that. So, okay, good. And so, Melissa, who determines a scrubbed sheet is in fact informational? So the district's legal team will determine that. So we cannot, so that's a good distinction, because even though the Second District PTA might produce a scrubbed information sheet, it is not officially scrubbed unless SFUSD says, yes, this qualifies. They'll have their legal counsel take a look at it to make sure we're allowed to put it in, distribute it through school channels. So they are the ones who make that decision, not us. But when you've seen a lot of them, you start to know what they look like. And so you'll make a pretty good draft that will probably get approved. Okay, next. So these are the positions that we have taken as a PTA this year for the November 2024 election. San Francisco ballot measures that we have taken a yes position on are Props A, J, and L. A is a school bond, J is funding for children, youth, and families, and L is a transportation tax, like on Lyft and Uber, that will fund Muni. The state ballot measures that the California PTA took positions on are yes on Props 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2 is another type of a school facilities bond. 3 is the constitutional right to marriage. 4 is a climate project bond. There's a lot within that that's like water and various other environmental related things, but it's generally all climate projects. And then 5 is lowering the voting threshold on local housing bonds. So those are 7 measures that, because we have taken positions on it, you at your school site do not need to hold study committees and votes and anything to advocate for these measures. You are allowed to put all of these into your newsletters, like, again, not using school resources, but if you send out newsletters through a non-school channel, if you have a website, whatever it is that you can communicate that's not using SFUSD's resources, you can say, please vote yes on A, J, L, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the PTA supports those, and there's information on the state PTA website about why they have voted yes on 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I put a link here on the slide to the study committee reports for our local measures. So if you want to understand, well, why did we take a position on this thing and why was it a yes? You can just read that committee report. We show our work. That's really important for transparency, and also one of the greatest currencies we have in the PTA, which is trust. So if we know people can trust us because we're transparent and we've shown our work, then we'll build stronger PTAs and be able to get more done. Since we're still on elections, I wanted to provide you with a bunch of links. So this is some San Francisco voter information. This top link is an election readiness toolkit. It's your one-stop shop. If you go there, you can make sure that the right address is in their system for you. You'll find the voter information guide. You will find all kinds of information about, for instance, we have ranked choice voting in San Francisco, where you can have many choices in certain races, and it tells you how that works, and it has a practice ballot for you to use. So that is your one-stop shop, the election readiness toolkit. There's a voter information pamphlet that is going to have the actual text of every measure that's going to be on the ballot locally. There's a state version of that VIP, and there is a local version of the VIP. So you can use those. They're available electronically and in paper form, and they will tell you, again, all the details of what the actual legal language of the measure is, as well as who's supporting it and who's not, and all of the arguments for or and against it. So that's a really great place for you to go to learn. There's also information on non-citizen voting information. This is important for us because voters passed a measure several years ago that allows non-citizen parents and caregivers of children 18 and younger to vote in only school board elections. So that's important information for you to have at your school sites. There's also a voter portal where you can enter in your address and figure out, what district am I in? Which supervisor do I vote for? Which assembly member do I vote for? It'll show you there what to do. There's places here you can track your ballot after you've submitted it. You can learn, as I said, about ranked choice voting. The Department of Elections actually has a really great new video that explains it in very simple terms. And there's some practice ballots for people who still might get a little bit confused on what ranked choice voting is. If you have questions, ask me also. I sit on the city's elections commission, and can share more information if you're interested. The last day to register to vote is October 21st. There are also links here to accessible voting options. If you need larger type, or if you have people who don't have sight and aren't able to do it visually and need other services, this is how they do that. There's also language access. Ballots are available in many different languages. So here's just some one-stop shops. You can share all of these links with your PTA, again, because we want to encourage them to be civically involved. That is the most important thing. Be informed and involved in your community, and vote in the way that most aligns with your values and what you think will support your child and your family. Okay, so I covered a little bit of this already, but I'll just skim it again. So again, you can only use PTA-owned resources to communicate our positions on ballot measures. So again, don't make copies on your school copiers. If you have an SFUSD owned and run website, do not post this there, because that is a public resource. We are not allowed to use that for persuasive, please vote yes on this thing. You may hand out persuasive materials on public sidewalks and in public spaces, not on your school site or in backpacks. You can talk persuasively about a measure, like a vote yes or vote no, off of school property. Unless, here's the one exception, if you pay a regular facility fee through the permit office, like if you were to have some kind of an event, that is we're going to have a rally and we're going to have people walk precincts to have people vote yes on A, you could have that kind of an event at your school site, but you have to go through the school district's permit office so that you are paying a regular facility fee. That is allowed, but that is a very specific process you'd have to call the permit office to do. You give factual, objective materials on school sites with no opinions expressed at all, just information. And as I said before, SFUSD approves what they would call a scrubbed copy. That means there's no persuasive information on it, just the facts of what something would do if it passed or if it didn't pass. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Take a quick breath. And I'm going to give you a quiz and see what you know about the structures that exist in the city that are helpful to understand as you are advocating to decision makers. So you can raise your hand. Let me see if I can get, I'm going to just pull up participants here for a second so that I can see you all and see who raises their hand to answer these questions. All right. Okay. Is the superintendent an elected position? Raise your hand if you know. Okay, first one I think was Rex. Unmute Rex and tell us.
The superintendent of public schools here in San Francisco is not elected. He is, the answer is no.
Correct. He is not an elected, it is not an elected position. He is appointed and hired by the school board. Thank you. Okay. How many members are on the San Francisco Unified Board of Education? How many members? Okay, I'm going to see if anybody else knows after Rex, and if nobody else has their hand up, I'm going to have you do it. Rex knows a lot of these things. Okay, Rex, go for it. How many?
7.
7. Do you know who they are?
Alexander.
No, say their whole name because people might not all know them.
Sure, absolutely. The president is Matt Alexander. The
Uh-huh.
vice president, Lisa Wiseman Ward. Then you have Jenny Lamb, Alita Fisher, Kevin Bogus, Mark Sanchez, and Phil Kim.
You got it. All right, thank you. All right, let's see if anybody else except for other than Rex knows how many members are on the Board of Supervisors. How many members of the Board of Supervisors? So the other thing you can think about is how many districts, how many supervisor districts are there in San Francisco? Anybody know? Is it going to be the Rex show? Let's see. Did we have somebody answer in the chat? Nope, it's not 12, but you are close, Liz. Yvette.
I think it's 11.
You are correct. It is 11. Okay. So they're just 1 through 11. So for instance, does anybody, or Yvette, do you know what district, do you know where District 4 is? Do you know what neighborhoods that covers?
I'm gonna guess Soma.
No. District 4 is
I
the
think District
It's a
4
sunset,
oh,
right?
sorry.
Yeah. No,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. People can unmute. Like, yes, it's correct. It's the Sunset. So it's that whole area, like south of Golden Gate Park and west of 19th and all the way down to like the Lake Merced, or not all the way down. Yeah, does it go all the way to Lake Merced? Because we just changed boundaries a little bit. So,
Yes.
so that's District 4. What about, does anybody know where District 3 is?
I think District 3 is North Beach.
Uh-huh. North Beach, Chinatown, Russian
Yeah.
Hill, that's all District 3.
That's
Correct.
me.
Oh, is it? That's right. Oh, that's right. Of course, we know that. Okay, so District 3 right now, for instance, Aaron Peskin is the supervisor for District 3. District 4 is Joel Engardio. So you'll start to get to know these things over time. Okay, how many, this is a tricky one. Let's see if anybody knows the answer to this. How many elected officials preside over city government in San Francisco? How many? I might ask you to name them, but how many? So I'll just be quiet for a minute because I know you'll have to count in your head how many elected officials govern the whole city, not the supervisors, all the other citywide offices.
Oh, I don't know that answer.
Any idea? Okay, Rex, how many?
I'm going to say 3.
Nope.
Besides supervisors. No? Okay.
Nope, that's one guess. Anybody else have another guess?
So these are elected?
These are elected
Ones?
citywide officers. Yeah.
I'm gonna guess 7.
Who said 7?
Tina.
Tina, you got it right. Okay, so do you know who that? Can you say what they are?
I was at one office today, so I know
Sorry,
that
I
one.
totally. I don't think I can say all 7.
Okay, well that's funny.
Melissa, which office were you at today?
I was at the city attorney's office today.
Yep.
Nice.
Okay. So here's what they are: mayor, treasurer, the assessor recorder, city attorney, district attorney,
That's the other one.
public defender, and sheriff.
Is controller the assessor recorder same thing or no?
Nope, they are not the same thing. Controller is actually a really special position. That's a 10-year tenure and a 10-year tenure. And that is an appointed position because they do not want that to be an elected or a political position. They try to have it be sustainable and as non-controversial as possible. So that is a 10-year appointed position.
Oh, nice. I learned something new today. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
And public defender is their own office with an elected
Uh-huh.
person. Okay.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right now it's Manu Raju. So, yep. So our public defenders. Great. Okay. Okay. One more, and then I'm gonna move us on to the final few things because we're running out of time here. How many state representatives represent San Francisco? Like the total number of state representatives. So that's assembly people, senators, whatever. Any idea how many total? Yvette, you continue to have your hand raised. I don't know if it's like a new raise or it's just a leftover raise.
That would be a leftover raise. I'll put it down. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody know how many state reps we have for San Francisco? Rex.
I believe we have 2.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Close though.
But is it 3 then?
It is 3. Yeah, I know I'm tricking you all, but you're learning. Yay. So
17 and 19?
Yep. So the assembly districts, we have 17, which is like the east side of San Francisco, and then 19, which is like the west side of San Francisco, and a little bit of Daly City. So right now, 19 is Phil Ting, 17 is David Chu, and then we have 1 state senator for the whole city, and that's Scott Wiener. That has changed. As district lines change over the years, things have changed. When I started getting involved in advocacy in the PTA, we had 4. We had 2 senators and 2 assembly people, but now we have 1 senator and 2 assembly people. And I'll just, say one note, and that is that, oh, I'm sorry. I said David Chu. I am totally like way back in the days. Like he is our city attorney now. Matt Haney is our other one. I was totally misspoke. Matt Haney is our District 17 assembly member. So when I first got involved, I remember being really intimidated by elected officials. I thought like how they seemed really important and, like, why would they ever listen to me? And I thought, I don't really know a lot. And I wondered why they would ever want to listen to what I had to say. But I started doing, this is many, many years ago now, because my kids they've all graduated from SFUSD now. My youngest graduated 2 years ago. I started cold calling offices and setting up appointments when I became legislation chair the first time for the district PTA. And, just started calling their offices and making appointments. And before long, parents were on their radar in a way that they hadn't been because nobody had really been organizing in that way for quite a while. And so it actually wasn't hard, but it did take a bit of research. There is a way to have a meeting with an elected official to use your time well and advocate effectively. And that's a story for another day. But we figured it out. And so we started doing a lot of that advocacy at the district level. So, okay, I'm going to move on and go through these last few slides sort of quickly because I think you'll have gathered a lot of this by now, and also just because we're getting really close to 8 o'clock, is how you want to organize and advocate. So when you are we all want to be effective advocates. That's as we established, this is part of what the PTA is here for. It's a main reason the PTA is here. How to be an effective advocate is first you pick an issue that matters to you. So what is it that the PTA cares about? What is important to the members in your school? If you're choosing a local issue, just pick something that really matters to you and then do a lot of learning about it. So this means you're going to read articles about it. You're going to do research about it. You're going to ask questions from people who know a lot about that issue, attend meetings, find resources, just so that you really know about it, because it's hard to take someone seriously when they come and ask you for something if they don't know anything about it, right? So learn, it gains you a lot of respect. You do not need to be an expert. Let me be really clear. You don't need to be an expert, but you do need to know enough to ask good questions. And you need to know enough that you have an idea how to even talk about the issue, okay? You can also sign up for California PTA legislative alerts. You can attend, there's an annual California PTA legislation conference that is fantastic. You learn tons by going to that. Put a few $100s into your PTA's budget to send somebody to go to that. It is really, really great. You can also attend school board meetings, board of supervisors meetings. All of those places are good ways to learn. And then the other thing you want to know next is who is the decision maker about the issue that you care about. That might be one of these elected officials we've discussed. It might not be. You know, right now, there might be a lot of advocacy to the superintendent about things that he is communicating and, you know, doing some advocacy in that way. Maybe in your, it might be advocacy at an organization that's really involved in something in your neighborhood. It's who makes the decisions about the thing that you care about or your community, your PTA cares about. That's who you're going to want to be talking to and advocating to. So figure out who that is. And then now that you know the issue and you've learned what you can and you know who's the power to make the change that you need, you have to advocate. And so you have to learn how to tell your story. So how you tell your story is, why does this issue matter to you? You're going to shape it. You're going to practice it before you go and talk to somebody. You're going to write it down briefly. Why does this issue matter? How does it affect you and the students at your school? What data and information can you share? So if you've chosen a particular issue and you've said this really matters to the kids because of this, then you can say this percentage of students do this thing or that thing, right? Or what's some other information you can share that helps flesh out the story? And then you need to tell them what you want them to do. I need you to vote this way on this issue, or I need you to endorse this measure because it'll make a big difference because you're an influential person and we really want this to pass. You tell your story around this. Personal experiences are very, very valuable. I can tell you the number of times that I have been up in Sacramento, the way that they hear so many advocates come into their office over and over and over every day. But if you tell stories that can stick in their mind, that is how people remember, is you bring in a story about personal experiences about how certain things affect you or students at your school. So once you've figured out what your story is, get a meeting, send an email, launch some kind of a campaign, do whatever it is, depending on what the issue is, like then you communicate it. Then after you get the meeting, you need to be very specific about that ask that you've already prepared to make. And then you have to do follow-up. So your advocacy doesn't stop when you leave a meeting or after you push send on that email. It's really important that you follow up because decision makers get very busy. One good thing to do when you leave a meeting or end a phone call is ask how you can check in with them again and when you leave the meeting. Get a next step in place so it doesn't just like fall off into the ether, right? And keep following up until you get a no. And even then, once you get a no, keep that communication line open and start to develop a relationship with that person. So the next time you come to them, they know who you are, they know that you're serious and that you do your research and that your intentions are really centered on important things like students. Make sure that you also thank them. No matter if you get what you wanted or not, thank them for their time. Do this in public ways. So we appreciate so-and-so making time for our PTA to meet with them, but also do it privately in an email or a note following up. So I think it's like rewarding positive behavior, you know? So particularly if they support your ask. So make sure you thank them publicly, privately, and reward that behavior. Okay, let's see. I see one comment here. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, great line for PTA budget. Okay. I let you read this through this list later. This is just a list of activities that you can do as a PTA to advocate, you know, emails, social media, text campaigns, phone calls, developing your relationships, as I was just starting to mention, with decision makers, letters, getting involved with ballot measure campaigns if it's something that the PTA has supported. There are a lot of different things you can do. And this last one, well, next to last one, is creating an advocacy chair position in your PTA that can be the point on a lot of this kind of work. And of course, vote when you have the chance to vote. An advocacy chair helps a PTA identify priority issue areas. So for your school, maybe they're going to understand what the general PTA priorities are, and maybe they're also going to do a poll or engage your members at a meeting to say, what really matters to us this year? Where do we want to focus our limited time? Because we are all busy people, so we want to spend our time on the things that matter the most. Advocacy chairs ask a lot of questions. When I first started doing that, there was a lot that I didn't know. And so I asked a lot of questions and tried to learn from people who had done it before me. Thanks, Yvette. I'll see you later. And we're almost done. We're going to be done in the next probably 2 or 3 minutes here. Another important thing to do is to inform your members. So make sure you get on your agenda. If you appoint an advocacy chair in your PTA, have them on the agenda to give regular updates on what's happening so that everybody knows the power of the advocacy and what kind of action is being taken. Attend trainings, form a committee. That's a great way also to build a pipeline of future advocacy chair leadership. It also makes the work more fun and easier when you have more people working together. Develop those relationships. Even if you don't have an ask, start developing relationships. But there is really a lot of flexibility. Maybe the next one of these we'll do, I'll tell you a little bit more about my story getting involved with this kind of work in the PTA. We don't have a lot of time for it now, but I did start not knowing a whole lot, just having a lot of passion because there were some issues that were really important to us at our school at that time. And so that brings us to the end, Q&A. I'll just want to show you this last slide that you will see resources. A lot of the things that we talked about, you'll be able to find them through the links on this page. And just a reminder that when we are thoughtful and we're committed to efforts that are important to us, we can make a really big difference. So just going back. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just see if there are any questions that didn't get covered before. Because I know that hopefully that was pretty thorough. Are there any last questions before we close up for the night? If you have questions, you can also just email me. Let's post the link to the slide deck, actually. Melissa, can you, or did you already do that? You already did that. Awesome. Thank you. So my contact info is in there. And plus you can get a hold of really anybody on the Second District PTA board if there's questions following up. But hopefully this is helpful for now and for future, right? There's always things that we're trying to make better.
This was fantastic, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
I know it was a small group, small but mighty group.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna just turn off the recording and then we'll close it out. Let's see.